are listening to Art at War, a series about art and war. Every episode, I, Lisa Weeda, explore what art can do in times of conflict. In this episode, I talk to Bakr Al Jaber. Bakr Al Jaber is a Syrian poet currently residing in The Hague. His work explores the relationship between universal beauty, war, and the duality of existence. He has a published project called Let's Talk Loudly and Laugh a Lot, in collaboration with Dutch photographer Hillie de Rooij. He was shortlisted for the Hizjra literatuurprijs 2020. Right now, he is working on new poetry. We're gonna have a horrible conversation today, but it's only an hour, so I hope you're up for it.
No, totally.
I read, of course, your work. You wrote in a we say bundle. I made this with mooie woorden. We made a book and we invited you. It was a book about Utrecht. We invited 10 writers, and the title was One City Without Walls or Borders, Stad zonder muren. A very hopeful title. We didn't make it up. The municipality chose this title for celebrating that Utrecht is a 900-year-old city. And you wrote about walls. I think we're going to talk about that today. But I was wondering, because you fled Syria, but I actually don't even know how long ago that was.
I left Syria in 2013, September 2013. So that's 2 years. Like the revolution started in 2011, March. Then it started to take so many transformation into war after that. But I left Syria in 2013.
And what was if I may ask, what was the tipping point to make the decision to actually leave? Because you were there for 2 years or 1.5.
It's the military service, because it's mandatory. And if you graduate the university, then you cannot leave the country legally and you have to go fight for the military. And at that time, the Syrian military, and still, is very much killing people.
Civilians.
So it was, the revolution started, demonstration, sit-ins. It was like with the Arab Spring wave. Then the regime with the military and the intelligence were opposing the people. So for me and for my family, it was the military service. So I was 3rd year at the university. If I continue to the 4th, it means that we cannot leave the country legally, or they can, but I cannot. If we stop, if I don't continue studying, then you can leave the country, because every year you delay for 1 year for a reason. So for me, the study is the reason. So we decided to move to Jordan, hoping that it will be few months, everything will be solved, we are going back, the revolution will win. In Jordan, we saw how naive our thinking was. And also the situation in Jordan wasn't ideal for all Syrians. You are not allowed to work. Meanwhile, you don't also get aid. So but the reason was military service for me and my brothers.
And did you already write poetry? Because you weren't studying poetry or writing.
Right? I was studying political science. And I was writing. I think I started writing very young, like how it started with me. I used to know poetry by heart when I was like 10 years old, 9 years old. Then my father, we always had gatherings and visitors. He will be like, Bakr, come recite for us a poem. I would love it. Like I would be in the middle of the spotlight and I would be like, no. And like they are enjoying it.
But poems by yourself or poems you read and recited?
Poems, very famous poems from famous poets at that time. There was one famous Bedouin poet, his name is Omar al-Farra, and mostly him I was reciting. But when I was like 14, then I started to write little things, and my father was like, I think there is something there. I mean, it's very funny and naive now if you remember it. But I think in 17, 18, starting to fall in love, writing poetry, I felt like, this is something I really want to be busy with. And it took another turn with the revolution.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, because did the subjects change? What did you write about before, or how did it work?
Very much changed. Before it was mostly just like observations that I thought no one is seeing, and about mostly love, like the specific girl that I was in love with for 4 years. But after, it's really like someone out of sudden noticing that there is another life that is happening. Like there is something that we knew, but further, like you just left a box and there is a whole universe around you. I mean, before that, I was really never busy with freedom or with political prisoners.
You were just living.
Yeah, literally, you are just living day by day. You don't have the luxury to think outside of that. But then I think it started with seeing people in Egypt in the Tahrir Square. Then you start to feel so many feelings, and it develop and transform. And when the violence started, also that very much influenced the vocabulary I am using.
But the violence, when you mean in Syria, or already at Tahrir Square with the Arab Spring?
Okay. In Syria, like when it was close by, when I am seeing a tank in the street, or when the soldiers are knocking on the door to search the house. When you see checkpoints, like so many checkpoints in the city, then the vocabulary that you use to write is very much different.
But do you mean that it also gets maybe even infected in a way, or it just changes indefinitely? When I talked to Maria, she said about when the war in Ukraine started, that there was a point of no return, that there was no way of going back anymore to, like, a status quo has totally changed in her life. Also about what becomes important and what is not that important anymore, or people you leave behind, or stories, or in your case, language.
I also can relate to that, but what I meant that you start to use words that I didn't use before in the writing.
Like what?
Like that you start to play with metaphors that you don't need to wake up to put an alarm tomorrow because there is a little bomb that will happen and wakes you up. Or I remember this little, that at the time that you were breaking the door to my heart, the soldiers were breaking the door of our house. You look a lot like that soldier, and I do look like the door that was broken. You get me? Like the vocabulary, the metaphors that you are using, you wouldn't use. Or did I have also very old text, like, did you ever see two MiGs racing? MiG is the Russian air striker. I did. Or that, you get me? You start to play with things you didn't play with before.
Yeah, so it's like a new set of images.
And vocabulary.
Yeah. And there's something I wondered about when I read this yesterday and tried to kind of get ready for this interview, because I know a little but not much, but it's so much I would have need to learn if I wanted to know better about the Syrian story. And I'm segueing into something I'll come back to. But how was it in general with, I think, art during that period of time in Syria? Because talking to Mina, for example, this song that she talked about is so strong, about all the freedoms that they, these women and young people are fighting for in Iran. And we talked about if art, and that's also a question, I guess, if art can be revolutionary or if it can help during a revolution. What was it like in Syria?
I mean, for sure it can. But for me personally, I mean, there was at the beginning of the revolution a song that was talking about the situation and saying that whoever kills their people is a betrayer, and people in the street are chanting, etc., etc. And it was very much circulated and people iconizing it, and it started to symbolize the revolution. But after a while, you feel that art, everything you do, all the artwork that is being done, is very much meaningless and useless. And even when you write something, even if I remember saying that if I write the best piece on earth that has never been written now, if I am writing Shakespeare right now, it's so meaningless because it doesn't become very little compared to a person who is dying outside, or to a building that is being bombed right now, or to 100,000 political prisoners in the prison. It seems, then you are like, I should not be writing. I should be doing anything else, but not being busy with art. Afterwards, you realize the power of it. And I personally think that it helped me, and whoever made art at that time, it helped us as individuals survive. So me personally, I would say I would never survive mentally, physically, and emotionally without writing. And while I was writing, I was never aware of that. So I didn't try to survive, but I survived because I wrote. And I think if you use, I'm still in conflict with this, like art as a tool. Do we use it as a tool or not? I think, if you focus on art as a tool, then it will lose its value. But if you focus on art, the tool, the other side will come anyway.
It will maybe become a tool afterwards, but not be the goal won't be using art as a tool to kind of survive certain circumstances, or...
So if you write to survive, you will not survive. But if you write to write, you will survive. It's a bit radicalized in how...
That's fine. Just be more radical.
Yeah,
please.
But I really a bit believe in that. Not a bit, actually, quite a lot.
But you just realized afterwards, or when did you realize? Because you talked about a bit earlier. You talked about having the feeling that art would not help at all. But was there then a period of time that you were not able to write at all, or angry with writing, or angry with poetry, or angry with, I don't know?
Actually, I realized here and I think in 2017 even. Like after I left Syria for a while, after I spent 2 years here, then I started to realize. And with me personally, how it works that in dark times, I do write a lot. And if I am doing well, I do not write. So for me, saying that I wasn't angry with writing, but I was angry in life. Meanwhile, I was writing a lot because of that.
So how is it going now with the writing?
Not very much well, because I'm doing all right. That's another like paradox that I really think you need to. I mean, there are people who sacrifice their well-being so the rest of the world can continue their normal, naive way of living. And I think with artists, it's a bit like that. I mean, when you spend a whole night not being able to sleep and you are worried about everything on earth, I don't have any other explanation for it other than, I mean, you are letting the whole universe continue its... You are playing part of a hidden game that is letting everything continue. I was looking at a part I wrote before. I also have the Dutch translation, but it's somehow saying that without poets who دون الشعراء من ينجي العالم البائس من كل هذا الخراب. Without poets who let this ugly, disastrous world survive.
Now, this is also the quote that I wrote down for the interview.
Oh, nice.
In Dutch is het: wie anders dan dichters zal de ellendige wereld van deze verwoesting redden? Wie opent de kooi voor de vogel? Who opens the cage for the bird?
This is what I mean with you suffer. Meanwhile, your suffer will not change anything, but it is changing everything. That's why art in wartime, it's really not changing anything, but at the same time, it's changing everything. Yeah. When you receive a message one time after out of nowhere for someone is saying, please continue writing because a piece you wrote helped me a bit in a dark time. Or also the power of art, that what it makes you not alone. So when I read a beautiful piece, the suffer, what I wanted to say, that you feel that you are not suffering alone.
Yeah.
Then it becomes all right. To suffer with a large group of people is easier to suffer on your own. So when I read a beautiful poem about the situation in Syria that symbolizes and talks about, then I feel that I am not alone. We are a lot and we are together. So even though it's not going well, but it's all right. I remember one time I had a beautiful talk out of nowhere with a girl from Bosnia, and she was talking to me about her memories and about her father talking to her about the war. It made me feel good, not because of what she shared, but because it feels that we are sharing the same suffer.
But is it like that secret universe you were talking about? Or
no.
Or a
now
parallel
I'm talking
world?
about people who suffer. If they can transform the experience, which mostly happens with art. Art is the best way to make what is personal general and what is general personal. That is the power for me. you are not alone anymore, because you felt like you didn't just see or like, oh nice, no, you, that someone manages to make you feel the feeling and the situation, then you experienced it somehow, so you know that
Yeah.
you are not alone.
Yeah, I understand. But is it, what I meant to ask, I think, is it, for example, I can read those kind of poems, for example, but I will never feel the same. You will have a different feeling with it. Maybe I can understand, because of course art is also meant to be not generalized, but made in a way that all humans understand and can have empathy for it, or kind of feel the feeling. But what I meant by asking about this secret doorway world, but because I thought that was what you were talking about earlier when you talked about lying in bed, awake and writing, or trying to, if I understand it well, think about poetry. But it's also a doorway that not all people have entered. So that's why I asked, is it maybe with this, for example, this girl from Bosnia, it's also a particular club of people who gets to read more into it than other people? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's also...
I think, yeah, then it started to be, to divide people into two camps.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm looking for.
And that's what I don't want to, because also at the beginning when I was here, I was doing that a lot. And I was, and now I'm being honest, I would see a problem of a Dutch person, and I would laugh very much. Like, come on, seriously.
Come on with your
like,
tiny problem.
Are you depressed because you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or because your cat died? And now, I mean, if Rumman, my cat, dies, I will go crazy. But then, meanwhile, like, yeah, see what's happening in Syria. Like right now, in this day, 100% people died, like today. At the beginning, it was a bit of, but then I realized that there is no comparison in misery or in suffering. And if you are heartbroken, and if your my father died in bombing, it's the same at that time. I forgot what I was talking about.
Well, I asked if there's one specific group who reads or not.
So that line of thinking will divide us into two camps: people who suffered, so they understand others suffer, and people who are who didn't suffer. And even though there is a slight truth in that, but I do not agree with it.
And so you've moved away from Syria, you've been living in the Netherlands for quite some time. Maybe this is a far off question, but you said that your poetry changed when the revolution started, but how has it changed since then?
You mean here?
Did again another thing enter your language?
Yes, the calmness and the silence. I mean, I grew up in a very much alive cities. You hear people arguing, you hear people shouting, you hear people talking. During the revolution and all the violence and the army entering cities, you think that you are the source, you are the center of everything. You think that the whole world is concerned about you and is thinking about you and is worried, like, oh, they are stuck, we will figure out something, we will help them. But then you come out and you realize that no one was even bothered to think about you. Like, then the whole mindset that you thought that everyone is knowing about what's happening with you, then you come out and someone asking you, oh, Syria? Oh, what's happening in Syria? Then you realize that, like it was an illusion. No one is caring. Then you start to understand that. I think it took me a while to let that anger rest. Then it's gray, it's calm, you don't know anyone. So even the way of writing becomes more calm. So I think my writing became way more calm in the Netherlands than how it was before. It was a lot of actions, a lot of things happening. Here is just me and myself talking to each other. The three of us is having a meeting. Me, myself,
and did also
and the writers.
The poetry you read, did it also change? You read?
Not really. Because I think there was not a lot of writings that captured the situation very much or also like it's big, very much complicated situation, but there was not a lot of writings that's happening, and sometimes I am trying to escape reading about it.
Of course.
Or sometimes there is also at the beginning there was very much difficulty with finding Arabic books in the Netherlands, and I hate reading on my laptop. So it's a lot, but I didn't change. I was reading 3 poets. I kept reading the same 3 poets.
And did the poetry change?
Their poetry?
Yeah, through time.
For sure.
How?
I mean,
of course, you grow up and
yeah,
you get older. And,
no, really.
Yeah.
Also, like if you read the first few works of Mahmoud Darwish, a great Palestinian poet, then you read his last poem, like it's 2 different people writing that. So the life experience, everything changes. But I'm trying to find an example in Syria.
Did it also change for you? Like the same poem?
Yeah, I was wondering.
Like for example, of course it changed throughout his life, but did reading the same poetry once you were here change the poem?
Yes, very much. And then you realize how good is the poem and is the poet. Because to make something that is open for translations and for different understanding, not in the way that very much different understanding, but you perceive it in different ways, then that's very much an artistic power. Yeah, to make it open for interpretation.
Yeah, and it can travel with you through time.
And through imagine that through your experience, not the writer's experience, the text is changing. That's very great, I think. For example, like he is Palestinian, when he talks about waiting on checkpoints, and before that, you never stood up on checkpoint. Then an experience and something happened with me that I was kept on a checkpoint in Syria for like 2 hours and a half, just because I was not born, but in Syria your Khimenta you cannot change it. So your Khimenta is where your parents' Khimenta is. So at that time, even though I was born in Damascus, my parents went somewhere else, which was under the Free Army. So just because that you are kept and integrated,
Because it's politically
yes,
complicated.
divided.
Yeah.
Then he is saying a slight comment or something about that checkpoint experience. Then out of sudden you are relating. But what I meant is even more artistic, because this is changing because based on your own experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so you kind of recognize something of yourself, and at first it wasn't there, but now it appears in your life. So there's a new hook in the poem that kind of anchors in your soul. I wanted to say soul, but that's a bit deep.
Deep is good.
What are you writing now?
I am trying to escape Syria. I feel I wrote a lot. I don't want my work to be fully connected to Syria and to connected to fleeing Syria and connected to being a refugee. And even though whenever I try to escape that, I find myself again writing about that. So literally, sometimes I want to say, I want to just write about love, no Syria, nothing. Then out of nowhere, a little metaphor is appearing, then it takes you back, then memories, then Syria, then leaving, then you start to play with all the metaphors that connects the story to back to the journey, to what happens. So I don't know if I should fight it, or it means that I didn't finish healing or writing about the whole. So now I am in that conflict, trying to get out of that box. I want to write more like bigger philosophical, writing. I mean, I feel when you write again something that's open for so many interpretations, that's above, it is about you and your experience, but it's even more general. I have a problem with directness in art, and I don't consider my writing direct. Like, I mean, I play a lot with metaphors and but still, even though I feel it's still direct, because
Too direct then.
not too direct, but direct. And I really want to go to a higher, bigger, more general way of writing.
So a bit like Mary Oliver poetry. I don't know. Sometimes it's just about stones and birds, but you're still like, fuck, this is a really good poem.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
But it's also really, well, no, I cannot say general, but she makes the general things she composes them so well that it hurts every time you read a poem.
Also, I play a lot with the stories from like Quran and Bible. Now I started a text about khati'ah, like the sin that no one committed, how lonely it feels, like the sin itself, because no one committed that sin. Like, how lonely is that sin now in its own universe?
Like just being the sin.
Yeah. Like, it's so boring to be a sin that no one committed you. No, honestly. So I started with the text about, the starting point is the sin and the philosophy of a sin.
That's really complicated. To me.
Yeah. But also I want to experiment very much. I feel, yeah, I want to, I mean, I never write that very much complicated, but I feel like I want to go there a bit.
You maybe want to leave the more, well, not direct, but the direct poetry to move into some absurd philosophic space where you can maybe let go of all the
Exactly.
worldly things.
I think it's the only way that I can escape Syria and being a refugee right now. Maybe. I really have no answer.
Maybe when the sin poem is done.
Maybe, sorry.
Maybe when the poem about the sin is done, you'll know a bit more.
Yeah.
Because sometimes making a new piece of writing, it also feels like a
Discovery.
yeah, but
It's
also
really-
like a new handvat. What's a handvat? Handle that you can hold, or it's a new door. But first you're in a hallway looking for new language, but also new opportunities. But then you need the first door or the first handle to hold on to be closer to a new kind of writing or a new kind of thinking.
Very much that's what's happening, I think. So hopefully when the text is done. Also, like, that's another thing. Sometimes I write a poem in literally 1 hour, and sometimes it takes 6 months. Like this, I started with it, I think 1 month ago. I wrote maybe 3 lines. Then 3 weeks after, even though I'm busy with it, like it's not then I wrote 3 lines, and now I'm just hoping that it will write itself. But another thing, that how also you, I don't know how is it for novelists or other, but people think that you cannot write art if you are not really busy with it. And that is time consuming, and we go back to the idea that you are staying up all night worrying about the whole universe. Meanwhile, the rest of the people, the same part, who sparks the sun every morning. It's people who worries, it's people who are making art. So what I wanted to say, that it's work, but it's not work. Like, you are thinking, there is something happening inside you and in your mind that's distracting you from everything, but you are not doing anything per se.
No, just laying on the couch is writing, or walking is writing.
There is this Arabic meme, الشاعر يعمل. Meanwhile, you are just chilling and it says, the poet is working.
Yeah.
No one talks to me, I'm working. Meanwhile, you are.
I'm looking for a way to get back, but to kind of round it up.
Do you think art can do, like, what's art can do, if I may take...
Okay. Yeah, I think what I like most is that it can transport a person to a place they did not understand before, in a way that it feels up close and personal. And a photograph can also do that if it's a...
It also iconized, like, you have this very famous photo of, in Vietnam, like, front of the tank.
Yeah, like historical moments, but also I think, because I think that's the interesting thing about art, and I think Teochew Cole also wrote about it. He wrote about, I like photography very much, and I also collect a lot of photographs for my research, for example. But he wrote a piece, I need to think how I can rephrase it, about how we also get tired of seeing particular images of war, for example. And in my case of work, I studied a lot of war pictures, also looking at my family history from the Second World War, the Stalin era, Holodomor, and the war in the Donbass, and now the war in Ukraine. But he talks about how people get tired of it, so they get used to the images, which means that you kind of feel less and less and less.
Objectifying.
Yeah, exactly. And there was one picture or photograph that I really remembered from the war in Donbass, and it was almost like a painting. There were no people in it. It was just a table with and the window was open and the vitrage gordijn. And on the table there was also a white, Kant tablecloth and an apple and a mug. And it looked really beautiful. The lighting was really soft, like a Vermeer painting, kind of yellow, white. And when you look 3 times, you saw that there were blood stains on the tablecloth. But it took so much time to see it, and it was a really poetic photograph. It was a really, really good photograph. And I think that's what art should do. This is a weird summary, but I think it should, because of the beauty of the photograph, it hits twice as hard when you look at what you really see. And I think that's something that, I try to do that in my writing or in the work I make. And also because the picture changes through time, like this poem also can do for you, for example. It's still the same work of art, but it gets more layered through time and through what I know, but also the situation is changing. I think if a work of art can do such a thing, and it is also emotionally loaded, but it's a lot to ask from art, but I think that's what works for me most of the time. But also a poem about a stone by Mary Oliver, it's fine for me, I love it. And it hurts also, but in a weird way.
I'm still really it's still for me ping pong between art is nothing in war times and art can do a lot in war times. And relating to what you were saying about how you get used to it, really at the beginning, like in Syria, when in few areas like there was massacres, but like the first time you see it in news, the whole house is silent, you are not eating. Then when it happens few days after, is like, we are eating a bit. Then when it happens again, the TV is on, we are having lunch. Meanwhile, like you read, like 75 people were killed in Homs, and you are seeing scenes. How you get used to this violence, how it becomes very like part of your daily life. And I think
like
that's
the soundtrack of
very much
living.
That's so dangerous. That's very dangerous, I think. But I mean, you cannot not make it happen. But the fact that it happens is really taking part of your humanity, big part of your humanity away. You are transformed into an object. So art can I think now
we're getting there, yes.
No, but art can humanize you in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that's also, to me at least, an important thing, that you should not forget to look at it again. But maybe that's too, I tend to be a bit more idealistic than I hope to be sometimes.
Maybe sometimes it's also its job that it's too painful that you don't look at it often again. That it's like an electricity stroke that but that should be very intense work, but that you use it only when it's but I have few poems that I not listen to unless I'm ready to die right now. You get me? That khalas, I want to cry and be in my cave and not see any human being on earth. And if you put it for me in the middle of the day, I will never listen to it. Never.
Okay.
But art really can bring you back to your humanity when you are used to, when the whole universe is losing their mind, which happens in the violent times. It can make you a human again. Like, it reminds you, like, don't forget, you are not an object. You have feelings. You are not alone.
Mm-hmm.
This is the power of art, maybe.
I think this is the best way to end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Peace.
You have been listening to Art at War, a series for Studium Generale ArtEZ, hosted by me, Lisa Weeda, and produced by Dennis Gaans. Please share the series with your artist friends, maybe your army friends, and talk about it over a beer. Thank you.